So here at the detachment, we got 11 different MOS producing schools. And bottom line is we got thousands of students that come through every year. Our instructors are key to success. I mean, they are our success as an organization. And one of the other things that I don't know if you've ever been an instructor at the DEA Academy or any big organization like that.
I've been instructor in task force schools for a number of years.
Yeah, so you get the drill. It's like the same thing over and over again. And for a lot of these instructors, there's like a mental burnout, and there's a chance here to engage with someone who's been through the kind of a number of highlights in anyone's career. You've kind of got it all in one lifetime, and to hear from someone from a different walk of life on how you've been successful and your own experiences could possibly add to our own. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you, Colonel, and all your colleagues there next to you. And I know this is going to sound corny, and I hope you guys hear this all the time, but seriously, thank you all for your service to our country. We don't say that lightly because there's so many people out there that have no freaking clue what it is to serve anybody but themselves. So God bless you all for what you're doing. You guys must be scraping the bottom of the barrel if you're coming to me. So I guess nobody else was available today, and that's fine. I love doing what I do. I was a cop for almost 38 years. I'm originally from Tennessee. I grew up in a small town called Murfreesboro, which is kind of a big town now, but just south of Nashville there. And when I was going into high school, my mom and dad were from West Virginia, so they moved us back there. So I went to high school and college in West Virginia. 1975, started as a uniformed police officer in the booming metropolis of Bluefield, West Virginia. And I know you've all heard of it, right? Raise your hand if you have. Oh, come on now. Nobody's heard of Bluefield, West Virginia? Okay, your assignment after today, go find out where Bluefield is, okay? It was just a little 35-man department. The city, about 25,000 people back then. I think it's considerably smaller now. But, it's, people think, well, what'd you learn in a small town like that? Well, you learn as much as you want to learn. If you go in with an attitude of, well, I'm just a small town local cop, I'm just a country bumpkin, then that's what you're going to be. But if you want to go in and learn to be a professional, like all of you have learned to be professional Marines, of course, in your occupation, you don't give people much of a choice, do you? My wife and I just moved to Orlando, Florida a few weeks ago, and I was living in Northern Virginia there. And my gym buddy was a retired Marine, Major Brad Toynbee. I'm sure you probably never heard of him. He's been retired for quite a while. But I hear lots of stories about you guys are tough. I mean, you're tough on your people. You have your expectations, and you don't meet the expectations, you're out the door. So it's not quite that tough in law enforcement. If we want to get rid of somebody, that's a several-year process. So, but anyway, I was a uniform cop for 6 years, trying to make it on, my starting pay in 1975 was $9,600 a year. I'm not sure how that compares to Marine pay, but I'm pretty sure you guys make more than that. I worked all the overtime I could get. I worked second jobs. I was electrician's helper. I even sold Amway, if you're familiar with that, trying to make ends meet. You do what you got to do to survive, to support your family. An opportunity came along to become a railroad police officer. Now, so I did. I was a special agent with Norfolk Southern Railroad for 5.5 years. People wonder what the hell a railroad policeman is. Well, you enforce laws on the railroad. You enforce all laws, crimes committed against the railroad, except capital crimes like murder. To be quite honest with you, and I certainly don't mean to ditz on any railroad police officers, because there's some true professionals out there, but where I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, and then back in West Virginia, it was nothing more than a glorified security guard. And that's not why I got into law enforcement. That's not why I worked midnight shifts and went to school in the daytime. It took me 11 years to get my bachelor's degree. It's one marriage destroyed, 2 kids with a single mom. I don't have a particularly delightful background. Then one of the railroad police officers, a former Virginia state trooper, worked on a DEA task force, and he's the one that got me interested in DEA. And so in 1987, I applied in 85, took 2 years to get the job, got hired in 1987, went through the DEA Academy there at Marine Corps Base Quantico, What a beautiful place for all you guys to hang out. I know that's where you like to go on your vacations. I will say one thing, and you probably think I'm a sick puppy. I enjoyed the Yellow Brick Road there. If you've been across the Yellow Brick Road,
oh yeah,
I loved it. We did it in the rain. It was muddy and crap, and we came out sloppy wet. Left our shoes out there on the tank trails because we had to run back to the academy. But I enjoyed that kind of stuff as a younger guy. Coming out of the academy, now I hired on with Charleston, West Virginia, my first post. You know, I'm not sure how you guys select your post. I don't think you get much of a say so, but we got a 5-city wish list. So I put in for Norfolk, Virginia, Wilmington, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida, and somewhere else on the East Coast. And, you know, DEA is such a compassionate organization. They looked at my list and laughed and sent me to Miami. Now, I just told you where I grew up. I am a small town country boy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Miami. I wasn't. My wife is from West Virginia. We came rolling into town, and this is how backward we were, just to be, you know, real blunt with you guys. We went to a BJ's warehouse. Never had heard of that before. Never heard of a membership warehouse. And we go to walk inside, and they stopped at the front door and said, "Where's your membership card?" And I was like, "Yeah, I got to be a member to shop in your store," which is just unheard of, you know. So this was 1987. We learned. We had some senior agents introduce me to chicken wings. When we went to that restaurant that day, I said, "That's the shit we throw away. We don't eat this part of the chicken." So now I love it. I'm a big connoisseur of chicken wings. But and all that to say, that's how much of a fish out of water I was going to South Florida. My wife was as well. The guys used to take us to lunch, and we'd go, you know, to Spanish restaurants, and they'd bring me a menu in Spanish. And I'm like, "What the hell? Did we drive across the bridge and land in Cuba here? I need something in English. And I need somebody who speaks English." And just as redneck and naive as you can possibly be, which was really stupid on my part. As we continue to live in Miami and get to partake in some of the undercover investigations and operations that were going on, just had a blast. And here's how we've progressed. And, you know, it's the good Lord taking care of us all along the way here. We moved into this neighborhood. On this side of our house is a family from Egypt. Our next door neighbor is Haitian. On the other side of them is Colombian. Across the street on the corner is a gringo. Across the street is Puerto Rican. Across here is Cuban American. It's one of the most eclectic neighborhoods I've ever lived in, and I'm loving every freaking minute of it. It's I think I finally got over my redneckishness, if that's a word. It is now, right? I go back to the small towns, and my you think I got an accent now? You ought to hear me when I go back to Tennessee for about 3 days. I sound like I'm right out of the deep South then. Spent 26 years working with DEA. After Miami, did 4 years in Miami, 3 years in Bogota, Colombia, where we worked on the Escobar case. After that, 3.5 years in Greensboro, North Carolina. Got promoted to my first supervisory position, went to Atlanta for 3 years, went to headquarters to do my time. You know, it was, and boy, it felt like doing your time too. It's like going into a penitentiary or something, just because you're in a headquarters setting and you're not getting to participate in operations. Although I was fortunate enough to get signed to a special operations, which was outside of DC, and you actually do work with the field on ongoing operations. So that was kind of cool. Did that for 5 years. While I was there, got promoted up to a GS-15, which we call an assistant special agent in charge. I was the executive assistant to the special agent in charge for the last 2 years, I think. And I'm not sure what you guys call it in the Marines, but we call it being a butt boy, because that's all I was. I was his butt boy. I love the guy. I would do anything in the world for him, and he would do anything in the world for me. But that's what you are as an XO. But the cool thing was I got posted preference coming out of there. So I selected Atlanta, went back as an ASAC, got assigned to create and start the DOJ. The DOJ has a program called the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, OCDF. Within the OCDF program, they have what they call that's later. So they had the sections they called strike forces. So at the time, there's one in New York City, one in Houston. So I started the 3rd strike force in Atlanta, got to pick out the office space, design the office, pick the colors, pick the furniture. I mean, stuff I have no clue what I'm doing, you know, and I got my wife and some other ladies to help me out because they had a little bit of taste. did that for 3.5 years. And I don't mean to brag when I'm proud of what my men and women did for me. We were the premier strike force in the United States. My guys were kicking ass and taking names every day. The first year we put something like 6 tons of cocaine on the table. I forget how many hundreds of pounds of meth. Cash seizures were almost $70 million. And this is just in Atlanta in 1 year. It was a target rich environment is what I refer to it as. Still is. Still, I don't know if any of you are from Atlanta, but it is a very target rich environment still. The Mexicans love it there. It's a major transshipment point for drugs coming out of Mexico and being dispersed throughout the East Coast. Spent 3.5 years as the ASAC there. Also had tech ops and what do they call there was another section in Atlanta called special operations. Basically, it was our wiretap room. All fell under me. While I was there, the administrator of DEA, I knew her well. She saw our successes and decided to promote me. You're not going to believe this, but I volunteered to go back to Washington, D.C. So that shows you how big a freaking idiot I am, because I was loving the field. I had always been in ops. The funny thing is, when she promoted me, it transferred me into the Intel division. I'll tell you, I'll be the first to tell you, the words Intel and Murphy don't go together in the same sentence. I was way out of my ballpark at this point, but I was put in charge of a classified program that the only thing I can tell you about it is what Edward Snowden divulged, DEA created, and other agencies came on board, and we no longer have that program because of that traitor. Okay, so that's about as far as I can go with that. After that, did that for about a year, and then I took over I was my last 3.5 years with DEA. I was assigned to the OCDEF program at DOJ, and I was the director of what we call the special agent in charge of the OCDEF Fusion Center. Now, this is a Purple Command where you've got, I think at that time we had 18 different agencies in there. I had 2 deputy directors, one from the FBI, one from HSI, a variety of executive staff, and then first line supervisors. And all told, we had about 350 personnel in there. And we were a direct support to the field in their operations. And what we were trying to do is deconflict operations so we could stop duplication of effort in the field, waste of taxpayer money. And believe it or not, we stopped a lot of potential blue on blue situations. And that's where cops are investigating cops, not knowing that they're each cops. They think the other guy's a bad guy. So, you know, there was not only a beneficial and an investigative benefit and a financial benefit, but there's also a safety benefit to what the Fusion Center did. Retired out of there in 2013, and not because I wanted to. I mean, I was a cop for 38 years. I don't know how to do a lot of other things. My dad was a minister growing up. When he retired from the ministry, he and my uncle opened a carpet store, so I know how to install carpet. Sucks, manual labor. I can operate a tow motor. I can drive a big truck. That's about it. So, what happened in early 13, my partner, Javier Pena, we were the 2 DEA agents assigned to lead the Escobar investigation in Colombia. Javier got there in 1988. I got there in 1991. The week that I reported to the embassy is the same week that Pablo Escobar surrendered to his custom-built prison. This is in June 1991. So I got in the embassy on Monday. Thursday, he surrendered. So I went around for the next 2 weeks telling everybody, hey, Escobar heard Murphy's in town. He might as well just give it up because Murphy's going to kick his butt, you know, and that's the good as my jokes get. So you guys on the right side over here need to lighten up a little bit. And I don't know who else is in the room there. So you're the only ones I can see. But what that did for me, it gave me a year to really learn the background of the Medellin cartel and what Escobar was involved with. Now, when I was in Miami, before I got there in 87, the most powder cocaine I'd ever seen at one time was 2 ounces, a baggie about this big. My first undercover case, we went to the Turks and Caicos Islands on a 53-foot Hatter sport fisherman. I didn't even know what that was. I knew what a John boat was because that's what I used to go on the river and go bass fishing. It was a multi-million-dollar boat that DEA had seized off some bad guys that had been wired for audio and video, and you could do undercover meetings. And we had 2 DEA boat captains who looked the part. And so we took 5 days to take the boat from Fort Lauderdale to the Turks and Caicos Islands, which I never heard of. I thought there was a Bahamas and then nothing until you got to South America. You know, I'm a country boy, right? So long story short, it was a hell of a trip. It's an experience I'd never change. I would never trade for anything, but I would not go again with those two guys because we were ready to throw each other overboard after about 3 days on the ocean. But when the deal finally went, a twin engine plane flew in from Cuba to Providenciales, flew to the end of the runway, taxied all the way down, made its turn to come back up. As it made the turn, the back door flew open and they threw out duffel bags containing 400 kilos of cocaine. So I went from 2 ounces to 880 pounds of cocaine. And I tell anybody listening to my story, I was addicted to cocaine at that point, just in a different way. I thought I was Sonny Crockett off of Miami Vice. I thought this was the coolest thing. You know, I thank the good Lord for giving me the job. So, you know, 1989, we were doing a deal for 17 kilos in Hialeah. Murphy's Law set in. Long story short, my partner was shot twice. We got to shoot out inside the house. He was hit twice with 45 caliber slugs, one below the elbow, one above the elbow. Survived. He's former Marine also. Survived, developed his arm back. It's very screwed up. They had to detach the muscle that all of us have under our forearm here. They detached, draped it across the back of his arm into his wrist. So the muscles that you and I use to operate our hands like that, those muscles now control his finger movements. The son of a gun, we used to have mandatory training PT every 6 months test. He came in on medical leave and could do more one-handed push-ups than I could do two-handed push-ups. You guys are just a bunch of show-offs, you know. But I'm damn proud of you. I'll say that. The informant caught a 357 round right there in the throat. We brought in a helicopter. He never made it to the hospital. It's just, you know, again, Murphy's Law, bad day for DEA. So that's the kind of violence that we were experiencing in Miami back then. Now you get to Colombia, scared to death. First night, my wife and I are there. It's a Sunday night. They pick us up. We'll get stuck in a boarding house rather than a hotel or an apartment. I've got my 9mm, you know, got diplomatic immunity, so I can carry a weapon. And we had authorization from the Colombian government to carry weapons down there. And we're laying there, and the bed is one of those that kind of dips in the middle. So when you lay down, you roll over on top of each other. And if you watch the Narcos series, it shows we had sex that night. That's Hollywood, because that, you know, that honeymoon's been over for quite some time. So we're actually laying there, and neither one of us go to sleep because we're just anxious and a little bit stressful. And the next thing you know, I hear gunfire outside the window, pistol fire. And so I reached over and grabbed my 9mm, and I'm going to get up to the window and peek. I hear automatic machine gun fire. Well, I'll put my 9mm back down because all I'm going to do is piss this person off, you know, if I shoot him. And that's when my wife and I looked at each other and said, what have we gotten ourselves into this time? But it turned out to be a blast. The first year was kind of anticlimactic. You know, you're learning your way around. I'm meeting the cops and working with the cops. I'm having to earn their trust and respect. Then the following year, Pablo Escobar escapes. You know, and I mean, I'm sure you guys know that story. If you don't, just watch Narcos, because parts of it are true. And if you like it, all of it's true. If you want to know the truth, I'll tell you the truth, though. The next day after he escaped from that prison is when the Colombians, we got on a plane and flew to Medellin. And for the next 18 months, Javier and I lived with the Colombian National Police, leaving my wife in Bogota. Now, I'd get to come home on weekends every once in a while. And a lot of times, when things weren't quite so busy, you know, we'd alternate. Javier would be in Medellin, I'd be in Bogota, and then I'd relieve him on the weekend, vice versa. So, excuse me, it wasn't quite as bad as it sounds. But this is where I guess you find out. I mean, I've been in gun battles. And I don't like them. I'll be the first to admit I'm scared in every one of them. Thank the good Lord, I've never been hit. I don't take credit. I'm not a tough guy. I'm not a Billy Badass. I'm a country boy. I know what I am, but I also know that the good Lord protects me. So I guess, you know, nice way to say it is I give him all the credit and the glory for helping me to survive down there. The Colombian National Police, we were flying out the old Huey gunships, you know, with the 30 cals in the doorways. We're going on operations. Every helicopter I flew in that the Colombian government owned had at least one bullet hole in it. They were considered a target-rich environment as they're flying by. Even their little birds were all shot up to shit. You're going in, you're the only English speaker. As you can imagine, are any of you Spanish speakers? Yeah. So like when I say, how you doing? It comes out like, ¿Cómo estás, y'all? And, you know, the Spanish language, y'all just doesn't translate. Even you guys doesn't translate very well. So when you're on these helos, and it was usually a lieutenant colonel or a major were in charge of these operations, we might be bringing 5 or 6 birds in. And at that time, a Huey would carry 8 combat ready troops. So we'd have a nice little squad going in there. A lot of times the leader would look over at me as you're coming into the LZ and you're taking fire. He's going, they couldn't say my name, Steve. It came out as Steak. So everybody's got a nickname. My nickname was Stick. I'm a lot of things. I'm not a damn stick. I'm 6'2". Back then I was like 200 pounds. Now I'm like 220. But he's going, Steve, you and me, front door. I'm looking at these guys. They got Galil 7.62s. They got Uzis. They got the only Sig Sauer machine gun I've ever seen in my life. One of them was carrying. And I got my Smith & Wesson 9mm. But you know how it is. You got to save face, and you got to do your job. And I'd never want to die. I love life, but I figure when the good Lord decides it's my time to go, I'm going to go. I can be sitting here talking to you guys and fall out of my chair dead. I can be trying to stop a bank robbery, whatever. When your time's up, your time's up. So it's not something I worried about. I didn't take stupid chances, but I didn't worry a lot about it. And, the truth is, a lot of guys were getting shot on that field when we land those helicopters, and there are long guns laying on the ground. So you had opportunities to get heavier weapons, if you get my meaning there. I know I'm assuming you guys have been in firefights and been out in the combat and all that. And it's not something I enjoyed. I was younger then. And I mean, you felt like a stud when it was over, didn't you? I mean, like, man, I just went through that, survived. Look at me, and then you're ready to go in it again. I'm like, oh shit, I got to do this again. And here's where the respect came in, because everybody talks about corruption in Colombia because of all the drug trafficking. And I thought the same thing. I stereotyped that entire country because the only Colombians I ever met were the ones I'd put in jail in South Florida. And it's the wrong thing to do. I mean, every man earns his own way, and, you earn your reputation. So it was very, very little corruption in the group we worked with. Even the search block, which was this 600-man force searching for Pablo Escobar for that 18-month period. But we worked with a smaller group called DEA. The DEA guys were plain clothes. They gathered their own intel, and then they conducted their own operations. So these guys were pretty autonomous. These are the guys that when the bullets started flying, Javier and I knew, they're not going to run off and leave us. We trust them with our lives. But on the other hand, they knew we wouldn't run off and leave them. We'd stand there and fight with them. So we don't tell this to a lot of audiences, but you guys understand combat better than most everybody in the world. So that's how we got along. And then on December 2nd, 1993, the day before, the ambassador had forced Javier to fly to Miami to talk to an informant on a bogus tip from this informant, a guy. He's even portrayed in the show Narcos. They call him Navegante, is his nickname. He's a real person. And we kept telling the ambassador, hey, it's bullshit. It's not, we know Escobar's here in Colombia. He's not in Haiti or Miami or anywhere else. And you know how ambassadors are. And ours was a retired lieutenant colonel from the Navy. So he was a pretty good guy. I know you guys don't think he was a Marine, but he thinks you guys belong to the Navy. So what the hell, It's a little friendly competition you guys have going, I understand. So, but the ambassador looked at Javier and he said, you get your butt on that plane to Miami, or you get your butt on that plane to Miami and go home and never come back. I'm kicking you out of the country. And you follow orders. And, you guys are very good at following orders. A lot of times we look at them as strong suggestions, and we might not follow them all the way through. If it works out, you're a hero. If it doesn't, you're the GOAT, that kind of thing. So anyway, Javier went to Miami, and I'm in Medellin. So now we had Army's Delta Force, and we had SEAL Team 6 with us for 18 months living there in Medellin. And I know there's friendly competition between the military forces there. In my opinion, these guys are all freaking studs, just like you are. They amazed me what their capabilities were. They actually had brains that, I refer to them as muscles with brains and a pair of legs, just walking around wanting to break something or kill somebody. They were fantastic. And some of them are still friends with, I'm still friends with them to this day. I just utmost respect for all of you guys. But anyway, we saw something going down. Now, on the show Narcos, it shows I was on the roof the day Pablo was killed. That's not true. That's Hollywood. I was back at the base. I was back at the Carlos Holguin Police School. I was in the room with all the U.S. personnel except the CIA guy. Nobody'd hang out with him. He had his own room, and that's clowns in action thing. That thing is whoa. That guy was way out there. He was way out there. So I'm in there with all the gringos talking, and I see the executive staff running over to the colonel's office. And law enforcement, we call that a clue, something's going on. So I go over to the colonel's office, and here was the cool thing. We had such a good working relationship with Colonel Martinez that he saw me come to the door, and he just motioned me, "Come on in, Steve, come in." And he's on the phone calling the operation. Now, the guy that found Pablo Escobar on that day was Lieutenant Hugo Martinez. The colonel of the search block was Colonel Hugo Martinez. So that's his son that found Pablo Escobar. Now, he's scared to death for his son's safety, right? Which we'd always, I don't know if your parents or not. I've got 4 kids and I got 5 grandkids. I'm always scared for their good, well-being. And he told him, he said, secure the area. We're on the way, but do what you have to do. So we're on pins and needles, man. I mean, it's like, is this really Pablo? Because we've been hearing this crap for 18 months. And the radio goes dead for just several minutes. And it's just, I mean, you know how internally long that waiting time is. It's the worst thing, waiting, isn't it? Even when there's going to be an ambush, you're going to ambush somebody. That waiting part just sucks. And it did that day too, waiting to hear back. And finally, a major comes up on the radio, and he confirms that they've just engaged Pablo Escobar in a firefight, that Pablo is dead, Viva Colombia. So that part of Narcos is true. Well, you guys know what it's like to get troops together to go out on a mission. How long does it take to get 600 guys together? I mean, it don't happen in 2 minutes, does it? You got to get everybody out. You have to issue weapons. You got to get the vehicles out there. You got to get assignments. You got to have roll call, make sure everybody's accounted for, get your butts on there, and let's go. So I rode up to the site with Colonel Martinez. Turns out I had the only camera that worked that day. They had cameras, but none of them worked. So all the pictures that were taken of Escobar's body on the rooftop, inside the house, all that stuff, I took those photographs. Now, we shared them with the Colombian National Police. We didn't share them with anybody else, but Javier and I, this is our 6th year of traveling around the world telling our story about Pablo Escobar. We're keynote speakers at conferences, but we also speak at colleges, at theaters and performing arts centers, basically anywhere that somebody's willing to pay. We'll go talk to them. We'll tell them the story. And it's the truth. And we tell the true story. It's not the Hollywood version that you see on Narcos. So it's really, and the reason I said that is because all the pictures that I took, we show in the show. So people are seeing firsthand what really happened, and they're hearing from the guys that actually lived it. So, you guys have this, I'm not sure, Colonel, if you're calling this a webinar or a podcast, but we have a pod. That's why I have this fancy, excuse my language here. That's why I have this fancy microphone and this fancy camera and the lights, and I got the soundboard over here and the headphones, just because we have a podcast called Game of Crimes. We're in our 6th month. We're 100,000 plus downloads every month. It's phenomenal. But here's our secret. It's me and it's not Javier. Javier's he's more into retirement mode than I am. I'm still a little bit of a workaholic. We're both 65 years old now, So I'm a co-host with another former police officer from Kansas that was one of my neighbors. And this guy, his name's Morgan Wright. So if you listen to podcasts, you'll hear Morgan talking most of the time because he's like a girl. He'll talk to your ears bleed. I mean, it's like my wife sometimes. She's like, "Oh, honey, just give me a break." But I love the guy. He's a brother. And what we do is we have a guest on every show. And so whatever event we're going to talk about, that guest lived that event. So we had Ed Davis in, former Boston police commissioner, was there when the Boston Marathon bombing happened. You got to hear from the horse's mouth what happened that day. We got him to talk about meeting Mark Wahlberg and the movie 4th of July or whatever that movie was. What was that movie? Independence Day? I can't remember.
Patriots Day. Yeah.
Patriots Day. There you go. Patriots Day. Recently, we've had the former administrator of DEA. We had my partner on that got shot in Miami that I told you about. We even bring some bad guys on. If you've ever seen the movie Blow with Johnny Depp, he plays the drug trafficker. Well, he plays a guy named George Jung. We interviewed George back in the spring, and he passed away in May. And we didn't start our podcast till July, but we got George's last interview before his death. Got him to admit to killing as many as 5 people. He's never admitted that before. Got him to admit that he worked for the CIA out of Panama. he talked about Noriega nationalizing his bank account. I think he said it was 61 or 63 million dollars he lost, which I think is appropriate for a drug dealer, but I don't have any problems with that. Just recently, if you remember the two LA County deputy sheriffs that were shot last year at a train station outside of Compton, guy just walks up, shoots them both in their cruiser, and one's a male, one's a female, and they're both shot in the head. The guy is shot in the forehead and 3 times in the arm. The girl is shot through the jaw. Her tongue is almost severed in two. It's just barely hanging on. She gets shot through both arms, so both ulnar bones are broken. If you go back and watch this video, it's on YouTube. He gets out of the car. She comes around and gets him and escorts him behind a pillar. With 2 broken arms, she applies a tourniquet to his right arm and saves his life because he was bleeding out, and then picks his gun up and provides cover until the cavalry gets there to get him to the hospital. This girl, Claudia Apolinar, I'm getting goosebumps talking about her because she is one of the most inspirational, motivational people I've ever talked to in my life. She, believe it or not, you shoot me, we're going to have a problem. Okay. I'm probably going to hate you the rest of your life. I'm going to want to see you dead, that kind of thing. She has no ill feelings towards her assailant whatsoever. She understands that he was just shooting at a uniform. It wasn't anything personal. That's her. She's from California. I'm not. I'm an East Coast boy. You shoot at me, it's personal. But it's just amazing. And you'll hear in our interview at the end, I asked her, I said, Claudia, so what do you got planned now? She said, I can't wait to get back to work. She's still on injury leave, but she wants to be a homicide detective. So that's what makes our podcast successful, is when you bring in people that actually live those events, that have walked the walk. They don't just talk the talk. And I guess that was a cheesy commercial for our podcast. Sorry, I didn't mean to go for a tangent there. So as my career developed, I got promoted to the highest ranks in DEA. In the civilian side, we call it senior executive service. I've been told I was equivalent to a 2 or 3 star general. So I don't know if that's correct or not. I know you guys call them 07s or 05s or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Were you like an SES 2 or 3?
I think I was an SES 3.
Yeah. That's pretty much like a 3-star general in the U.S. military.
Well, and I hope that doesn't change your good opinion of DEA, because they promoted me. I think I was like the token hillbilly, Hey, we need a token hillbilly. Get Murphy. He'll do it. So, especially in law enforcement, if I'm not talking about what you want me to talk about, Colonel, you tell me. But what I learned growing up through the leadership steps, and what I learned from mimicking people that I respected, that I really preferred to, that's one of the best bosses I've ever worked for. I'd like to, if I'm ever in that position, I'd like to do what they did, male or female. I've had outstanding female bosses as well. What I would explain to my subordinates is, I don't have all the freaking answers here, especially in that fusion center or in that classified project. There was so much technical side to that. I was just happy I could use my key card to get my office every day. I mean, it was so technical in there. But so don't come to me for the answers. If you need help finding the answer, I will help you find the answer, but don't expect me to have the answer already, because you guys are much smarter than I am. And whoever's watched this on video, guys is inclusive of everybody. Men, women, dogs, cats, everybody's a guy. Okay. It's a Southern thing. So, what I viewed my responsibilities as a leader was, 1, leadership by example. And believe it or not, it could be something as simple as picking up a piece of trash off the floor when you walk through your bay and somebody's dropped a piece of trash. People are watching you because you're in those leadership positions. They're looking to see, does he think he's too good to bend over and pick up that piece of trash? But what that leads to is, the next time somebody drops a piece of trash, you'll see somebody else picking it up, because as simple as this sounds, they saw the boss doing it. I took the time to get to know my people, especially in the strike force setting. It was new. People didn't, the bosses didn't think it was going to work, to be honest with you. I took that as a challenge. You tell me I can't do something, let's see what happens. Maybe I can't, but I'm gonna find out. And I'm pretty sure you guys are like that. That's why you're freaking Marines, right? I mean, if you want to be something else, well, I won't say Army, but you can extrapolate that on out there, right? Let's see what else. you always have to be cognizant of what you do. So like one time I had been to some meetings downtown and I came back to my office at the strike force, and you can tell I like to talk. I'm good with self-deprecating humor. If you can't laugh at yourself, life's going to be really boring for you, or it's going to be really stressful for you. So I would always speak to everybody. If I don't care who you were, and the janitor is not below me. The man or woman doing that job is taking care of their families, the way I look at it. So it's just a different job than I have. Well, this one particular time I came walking in the office and I just had a million things on my mind. We were preparing for some dangerous ops. And then we had some headquarters, what is it we used to call those drive-by fire drills, where they wanted this information yesterday, that kind of stuff, And I didn't speak to anybody. I walked in, passed several people, and right in my office. And it wasn't 3 minutes till one of my first line supervisors is in my office, who was a really, really good friend of mine. He was a Murphy also. He's now the boss of DEA Atlanta, Rob Murphy. He came in, he's like, "Hey boss, everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, Rob, what's up, man?" And he's like, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah, what's wrong? I got a booger on my nose, or I look like I'm gonna throw up or something?" He said, "No," he said, "Everybody knows you walked in the office and you speak to anybody. We thought there must be something wrong." And that for me was a lesson right there, that your demeanor really sends a message out to everybody, and your people, when they trust you, and you hope they like you. I mean, you might say that, "I don't care if you like me or not," but I think down inside, we all hope people we all kind of hope that people will like us. It just really taught me right there that everything I did is always on display for the people that you hope are looking up to you. And apparently they did, because they cared about the boss. In fact, when I retired in 2013, all those people from the strike force in Atlanta paid their own way and flew to Washington for my retirement dinner and presented me with a brand new Glock 40 caliber pistol. And that's my primary carry now, because it came from them. It's special. It's very special. So other things about leadership, I would never ask anybody to do something either I hadn't done or I wasn't willing to do myself. One of the things to bring a Purple Command together that I found in Washington, and Washington's headquarters. So headquarters is different than the rest of the world. There's a lot of touchy-feely bullshit goes on there, right? Just to be real blunt about it. But I said, you know what? I would think everybody would get involved in supporting a charitable event. So what we did, there was and I just forgot the name. I got the plaque, but it's still packed up. There was a group home for abused children, special needs children, and some other category that fell in there. And so we put together a work detail, and we'd go up there on Saturdays, and I might only have 20, 25, 30 people show up, but we'd paint, we'd do minor repairs. But the camaraderie that created inside my fusion center, my office, was unbelievable. And now people see that you're willing to get out there. And I brought my wife, and my two daughters were young teenagers at the time. They weren't real happy about being there, but once they saw some of the cute guys there, they were okay with it. It's each his own, right? So there's a lot of little things like that, in my opinion, that go a long way in portraying yourself as a true leader. Now, I don't say I'm a leader. I'm saying it to you because I think that's what this conversation is going to be about a little bit, but I really don't consider myself a leader now. But it's amazing what's going on in life after DEA. Honestly, I thought I'd be one of those blue coat security guards down at the federal building telling you to put your gun in the locker. You can't carry your gun in the federal courthouse. And I thought I'd be a security guard. And that's when this Netflix thing came along with narcos and civilian side, I'm sure the military side too, you can't make money on the side. So we had to retire. Well, I was 56 already that year, and mandatory law enforcement retirement age in the feds is 57. Because of my position, I could have an extra 3 years if the administrator grants that to you. And she already had. And I had at that time, I had two daughters in college in Virginia, so I needed the job. But then Netflix came along, and I just figured, I'm the kind of guy that I figured the good Lord's going to open doors for me, opportunities. And if a door is open, I'll step through it. And if it works out, okay. And if it doesn't, I'll step back through the door. And what I pray for is, hey, okay, I tried it, God, it didn't work out. Show me the next door. Don't let me be disappointed. Show me what the next thing is, and not meaning to put my Christian philosophy on you, but that's just the way I am. I grew up in a strict Christian household, and my dad was a Southern Baptist minister. So, that thing about getting them spankings, oh boy, I got more than my share. But you know what? There's a whole lot more I deserve that I didn't get. Because that old saying about preachers' kids are the worst. Yes, they are. So, but it's led to opportunities like the podcast now, our speaking tour, our worldwide speaking tour. Again, I don't say this to brag. You're familiar with the Sydney Opera House in Sydney, Australia, right?
Yeah.
I hope to see that building one day. We sold out the Sydney Opera House when we spoke there. That's how popular the Escobar story is, and it's all because of Narcos. It's not because of Javier, what we did. People don't really care about us. You can ask people, hey, Steve Murphy and Javier Pena? They'll go, who? But if you ask anybody, who Pablo Escobar is? Everybody knows who Pablo Escobar is, right? Now we're negotiating potential television series. I just flew up to Washington 2 weeks ago. I've been invited to join a new company that would be like a podcast hosting company as well as other productions. It's just amazing what goes on because of your reputations you guys build as you're going through your careers.
If I could just ask you a few questions, and
sure.
Obviously I saw the Narcos series, and it was pretty good. So I think you were as a consultant on the show, overall, I think for myself, I binge watched this thing because I thought it was pretty engaging. And we lived in Miami, Florida, a few years ago, and
nice.
my cousins, my two cousins, older cousins, they're 35-year Miami PD cops.
Wow.
And one of them worked drug. He was on a drug task force, had his own team, and took me on a ride along and saw some sides of Miami that I've never forgotten since then. But I guess my question is, what's interesting is you told your story about your career in the DEA. It sounds very familiar to that of a Marine who's been in a number of years, and you're constantly moving. And what I thought was pretty interesting about in the show in Narcos and the way you kind of just explained it, I could not imagine bringing my wife and or kids to a place where there's almost like a low-level war going on,
right?
And especially a drug war that's pretty front and center. I look at like my 4 tours in Iraq, and in any one of those circumstances would I consider bringing my family over, because of how distracting that would be to the mission. So, one, I'm pretty impressed that you did bring your family, and the DEA kind of supported that in that way. But I guess the heart of my question is, as you went through your career in the DEA, whether it's Colombia or other cities, what is do you have like an initial like process to jumping into your new position? And is there what's the Steve Murphy MO for snapping into a new job? And how do you obviously you've been successful at every single one of them, so whatever you're doing is working.
Just very quickly about my wife. Now, my 2 sons, were from my first marriage, and we could take a wife, but we could not take children to Colombia. So, and my 2 daughters, we adopted while we were in Colombia. So both my daughters are Colombian by birth. They're American citizens now, but don't speak a lick of Spanish. Idiots. That just drives me freaking crazy. But, and about her, let me tell you, she's got bigger balls than I ever thought about having. My wife. She's one of the toughest women I've ever met, career nurse. And I joke around about this, but I'm serious when I say this. I used to ride motorcycles as a young guy, and when I met her, she owned her own motorcycle. Now, how can you not fall in love with a woman that owns her own freaking motorcycle, right? Those are few and far between back then. And we've been married 37 years now. We dated for, I think, 4 years before we got married. So we've been together quite a long time. So I mean, I give her a hard time and she gives it right back. But in my world, my wife sits up on that pedestal, you know, and right where she should be. You know, she's the queen of my life, and she has supported me 110%, just like your spouses do. I'm pretty sure. You know, it takes a special spouse, man or woman, to put up with what all of us do. My first wife could never put up with this shit. I couldn't put up with her. That's why I got rid of her. So that's another story. But coming into the offices, like coming back from Colombia, now I'd been in Miami and I'd been in Bogota. I got into Greensboro. I mean, Greensboro, North Carolina, I'd never been there. Had to look it up on a map. Didn't want to go there. I wanted to go to Charleston, South Carolina. Turned out to be one of the nicest places in the world to live. It's beautiful. The people are pretty nice there. The city's clean. You know, you got Winston-Salem and High Point are close by. And okay, they got all kinds of college sports in North Carolina. I love that part. And you got the beaches, you got the mountains, you know. So we like North Carolina. But when I got there, I didn't tell anybody about the Escobar story because there's an old country saying, if you got to toot your own horn, it probably ain't worth tooting. And I believe in that. So if you got to come in and brag on yourself, you're probably lying, you know, or there's some other issue that you're just feeling a lack of self-importance and you need to pat yourself on the back. So if you wanted to ask me about it, I'll talk your ear off just like I'm doing right now. I'll tell you everything I know about Pablo Escobar and the investigation and what we did and the good stuff and the bad stuff. But I just didn't go around and start. It wasn't like I walked in the office the first day and said, hey, everybody, I killed Pablo Escobar yesterday. What'd you do? You know, it's not like that. You come with a chip on your shoulder, somebody will knock that chip off for you. So you just came in with an attitude of willing to learn. I'm not here to teach you, you know, and this was before I became a supervisor. I'm just here to get along. I want to do my job. And I'll be honest with you, after 4 years in Miami and 3 years in Columbia, when I got to Greensboro, I felt like I didn't have to prove myself to anybody else ever again. And at this time now, I've been a cop 19 years, and I'm just getting to that point where I'm feeling like I don't have to prove myself anymore. 4 combat tours in Iraq, man, if I was you, I'd say, you want to see steel balls? Come here. I'll show you some. I don't have to prove myself to you at all because you have paid your dues. You've served your country, which that's what we all sign up to do, man. We military civilian, you sign up to be a public servant, which means we serve our public, right? That's a huge responsibility. That's a huge amount of trust to put on an individual. And that's why we all get so pissed off when somebody carrying that badge of honor betrays the badge. You know, I'll be the first to tell you, and so will my partner Morgan, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. A bad cop deserves to go to prison longer than anybody else. He needs to serve all the punishments that come along with prison life. And in my opinion, should never get out because you betrayed the public's trust. And I'm getting into personal opinions here. So that's not what I meant to do. Once I became a supervisor, you call ahead. You know, I mean, when you guys are going to get transferred, I'm sure you're calling ahead because you know people everywhere. It's the same way in DEA. I know people all around the world. So when I went from Greensboro to Atlanta as my first line supervisory position, I'm calling the guys down in Atlanta to find out, hey, do I really want to work down there? Do I want to take this transfer? And the special agent in charge in Atlanta was calling me, asking me to put in for it. So you do your homework before you get there. And then when I go in, I was not shy. I think, smart enough to keep my mouth shut for the first week or two till you kind of get your feet on the ground and find out, you know, it doesn't take long to figure out who's in the cliques, you know, who's your troublemakers going to be, who's your rabble razzlers, who's the people who are going to go stir the pot and walk away and let you fight it out. You know, there's all kinds of personalities out there, and that's what makes it kind of fun, to be honest with you. But you just went in, and then I would hold meetings. If you got assigned to my sections, you had to come in and sit down with me maybe for an hour or two, and I'd give you my philosophy and usually put people to sleep. But, you know, I thought it was important enough to take the time to talk to you about it, what your expectations are from me as your new boss. But now when I went in, I would go to my boss and say, what's your expectations? What do you want me to do? What is my mission here? What do you want me to accomplish? You know, my first position was a multi-agency task force in Atlanta that it falls under the drug czar's office. They call the high intensity drug trafficking areas HIDAs. So I was a first line group supervisor in a HIDA. And my special agent in charge told me, your mission is to go over there and repair the relationship between DEA federal agents and the state and local counterparts that are assigned to the HIDTA offices. Because my predecessor went in with a big Fed chip on his shoulder, had never been a local police officer, liked to show his pay stub to the local police officers in Atlanta, which the starting pay for an Atlanta police officer is you can qualify for food stamps. That's how bad the pay is there. And he's in there showing his federal paycheck to these guys. And, you know, as a federal agent, you make good money after you get your GS-13 and on up. You're making pretty darn good money for being a cop. So all I did was go in there and treated everybody fair and equitably. For me, every office I've ever been to as a boss, everybody gets a clean slate. People cannot wait to come and tell you, hey, you know, that guy over there, you got to watch him because he did this and, you know, he's going to talk behind your back. Well, what are you doing? Aren't you talking behind his back when you're in here talking to me? You know, everybody gets a clean slate. I will treat you fairly till you prove to me that I can no longer treat you fairly. I've been burned by that in every single office. My last office, an FBI agent, I put him in a position of trust, the most trusted position in the whole Fusion Center. He was a GS-14. I was an SES. He answered to no one but me because his position, he was in charge of so much. And I did it to create a more amicable work environment to show that I was being fair and impartial. Well, he used to rat out all the other FBI agents to me. So that right there told me, you know, keep him at arm's length because if he's ratting on them today, he's going to rat on me tomorrow. Well, the next thing you know, he's in that position for about a year. And next thing you know, I find out that he has gone into our database. We had a secure database that was accessible only inside the Fusion Center. There was no outside connections to it. And it housed terabytes and terabytes of investigative information from all the investigative agencies associated primarily with narcotics trafficking throughout the world. We had the Five Eyes partners in there. We had we didn't have the Mounties, but we had the Brits, we had the Aussies, and we had the Kiwis in there. And we were working on the Mounties to come in and join us. He went in and did an analysis because, you know, he had his PhD. So now he was doctor agent. You know, I used to show him, I got a boil on my ass. Can you lance this for me there, doc? I just pisses me off when people do that. Because my oldest son is he's a medical doctor. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He does spinal surgery on children at Children's Hospital of Atlanta. That's a freaking doctor, right? So anyway, he pulls all these stats together and then he splits them into three parts to support his argument and says that, well, you know, the FBI is putting more data in the computer than any other federal agency, including DEA, but DEA is getting the lion's share of the information coming out of the computer. Well, when you put the three data sets back together, that wasn't true. But if you parse them out to meet your argument, of course they meet your argument, right? That led to a real shitter. I mean, it got ugly. We were meeting at highest level as a deputy attorney general, which the next step's an attorney general. You know, that's how ugly this got, all because of this guy, me putting my trust in this FBI agent. Finally, they came in, the deputy director came in one day and he said, I want you to know in 3 weeks, we're going to start redacting our information. We're not sharing everything. Said it's in direct violation of the MOUs you've had in place here for 8 years or whatever it was, you know, and if you do that, I'm going to lock you out. Well, you don't have the authority. And I'd stand up and I'd look at my nameplate and I'd say, it says director. I think I do. We'll see. So, you know, and that led to more meetings. Well, sure enough, when that day rolled around on Monday morning, he came to my office. He said, I'm just letting you know, we've just implemented our system. We're redacting effective today. And I confirmed it with him. And I said, okay, hold on. Picked up my phone. I called my tech guy. And all I said was lock him down. Hung up the phone. I said, okay, see ya. He's like, what'd you just do? I said, I did exactly what I told you I was going to do. He said, what does that mean? You locked us out? I said, go try your computer. If you got to go pee out there in the hallway where you got to scan your card to get back in, you might want to have somebody hold the door for you because you're not coming back in here, not on your card. And it led into, when I retired, I had 5 OIG investigations on me. They were all, it was all administrative. There wasn't anything criminal. It was all and they were all, 3 of those were filed by that particular FBI agent who filed whistleblower protection status against me. I couldn't even remove him. You know, here's a guy I had zero trust in. So anyway, back to our story here. I might have been venting there just a little bit. Yeah. I would find out who's going on, you know, who's in the office, people that I know and already trust. There's always somebody there that you know. Come in and show everybody again that you're willing to be a team player, that you're not, you know, Johnny know-it-all, that, oh, hell, I've done this and you haven't. I was in Colombia and you've never been anywhere. It's just, we're all a team. I mean, you're all a command together. You all have the same mission. So that's pretty much how I would do it. There's nothing special about the way I handled it, to be honest with you. It was common sense. What made common sense to me is what I did.
So on a separate question, but kind of want to get your opinion on this, especially as someone who's seen the drug trade from your perch. How is the battle and the war on drugs going? How is this looking from your perspective? And the reason why I asked is I was at Southcom, and their focus is mostly on counter narcotics, and so seeing the sheer amount of drugs that is pouring in the United States from Mexico, from South America, it gave me a perspective that, man, this is almost an unwinnable war. And maybe war is a wrong term, and it gives it there's got to be winners and losers in a war, and that's not what this is. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, my first question to all of you is, do you think you can go on just about any street corner USA and buy cocaine or marijuana or meth or pills? The truth is you can. We all know that. The biggest, and every show that Javier and I do, and before COVID, we were averaging 75 appearances a year. I was seeing Javier more than I saw my wife. We were traveling all around the world. We've been around the world several times. and I'm loving it. I'm having a blast. I look at life as an adventure, and it's just another adventure. But so every show we do, we have a Q&A, and it's just like you guys. You can ask anything during our shows. And this always comes up about, well, you guys killed Pablo Escobar. Did that stop the cocaine trafficking? Did that solve the war on drugs? First of all, the war on drugs is the biggest government misnomer there's ever been. Because here we are going after the world's first narco-terrorist, Pablo Escobar, the world's most wanted criminal. Remember the show, America's Most Wanted? They actually flew down and did one episode only of the world's most wanted. We took a film crew up into Medellin and set up roadblocks and all kinds of stuff so they could get some good footage. So the world's most wanted criminal, the richest criminal that has ever been, we're going after him. And what did we send? 2 agents, Javier Pena and Steve Murphy. That's not a freaking war. I mean, it's a joke, if anything. Javier's a small town Texas boy, just like I'm a small town hillbilly. The difference is we do have very strong work ethics, and we're probably not the smartest brightest bulbs on the tree, which comes in handy when you're in a firefight because you'll run towards those bullets. So people always say to them, well, why are you even fighting it? If you can't win, why do you fight drugs at all? Well, I was brought up under certain moral standards that I'm pretty sure you guys were as well. That you help your fellow man, that I am willing to pay my fair share of taxes, but I want all of you guys to do the same. And I want every swinging dick that benefits from living in our country to do the same thing as well. Now Javier and I are huge proponents of education at the earliest possible age. I tell you what, our new house, we're on a small lake here in Orlando. There's about a 5 or 6 foot alligator comes to visit about once a week, and he'll come out of the water, but there's a little bit of distance between us and him. We don't worry about him getting up the bank to where we are. But my 4-year-old granddaughter came over, and so I took her out on the back patio and was showing her the alligator. And you know how kids are, they're fearless. And she's like, Mr. Alligator, I'm going to come down there and I'm going to slap you on the head, and all this stuff. And then I scooped her around. I said, listen here, young lady, let me tell you about alligators. And by the time I finished talking to her, she was like, my grandkids call me Pops. She's up in Pop's arms, scared to death. And I said, baby, I'm not doing this to scare you. I want you to understand you have to respect that thing down there and not get close to him because he will kill you. And I told her, I said, if he gets hold of you, Pops can't save you. She thinks her Pops can save the world. Little does she know, I'm a fat old man now, but, and the reason I say this is an example. I don't care how young kids are. If you need to scare them and get their attention, I'm okay doing it at the earliest possible ages. Now, I sound like I try to sound like I'm speaking from a position of authority and knowledge and experience and expertise. We do things, Javier and I do things with an organization where we've been on Capitol Hill twice pre-COVID. The first time we talked to the House side, the second time to the Senate. We've been to the American Legislative Exchange Conference, where all 50 states send representatives once or twice a year. And all of those were to discuss counterfeit medications coming to the United States, because so many of the counterfeits, hell, they look better than the original stuff, the oxys that are out there, Xanax, whatever the medication might be. The counterfeits look better than the real thing. But we all know what fentanyl is. And that's what the Mexicans and the Chinese are using, and Pakis are using it. The Indians are doing it. They're putting that in there to be the active ingredient, which when they make these pills, they use a cement mixer. They put the binders in there. They throw some fentanyl in there, give it a few turns. Then they start pressing out pills. Well, there's absolutely no quality control to guarantee that that fentanyl has been equitably distributed throughout the binders in there, right? So you may get a pill that you think is an oxy or a Xanax, and it has 0 active ingredients, just binders, because of the way it was mixed. But you also might get the one that has 30 grains of fentanyl in it. It takes about 2 or 3 grains to kill you, to kill us. I mean, you big, healthy stud Marines, 3 grains of fentanyl will put you on the ground for life. That's how dangerous that crap is. So and here was the surprising thing of that. So many of those legislators, whether federal or state level, had no clue what counterfeit medications were. Now, this was 2 years ago. So now we're starting to see more and more interest. It's slowly picking up. And I guess I say that is the reason I'm saying that is I view narcotics as one of the worst things that's hitting our country. We're experiencing this year, we're going to have over 100,000 overdose deaths from illegal narcotics just in the United States. 100,000. That's 294 people per day, I think is the right number. So I throw those numbers out to people, and they just kind of look at me like you guys are, like, okay, that's 294 people. That's a lot of people. Well, look at it like this. I got this from another DEA agent. What if a commercial airliner crashed with 200 people on it every day for a year in the United States? What would the outcry be from everybody? I mean, hell, one air crash in the world grounded all of those 767s or whatever they were, right? The whole world grounded. But we're having the equivalent, more than the equivalent of that every day from drug overdoses. And our legislatures are just now starting to get on board with this. So why I'm saying education is one of our wonderful reputations in the United States is that we're the leading consumer country of illegal narcotics of the entire world. A reputation that nobody should be proud of, right? We consume more illegal narcotics than anybody in the world as a country. So through education, you hope that you're getting the word out there. But I mean, you guys see it as well as I do. We're getting so damn touchy-feely anymore that, I can't say anything because I hurt somebody's feelings. And on our podcast, we have a Patreon channel, so only subscribers can hear that. We've got a few hundred subscribers on there. And so we can talk about things that are, we say near and dear to our heart. It's a bitch session is what it is. And
so I'll let some of our guys around the table here. We got some guys off camera here, but I'm sure they got questions.
I'll just hear to listen, sir. Just here
to listen
to the stories.
All right. Go ahead.
How's it going, Steve?
Good.
This is Chris Malvo. Hey, I just want to ask, what's one of your biggest challenges you had to face in your career?
I think it's probably, and let me just preface this by saying I'm not claiming PTSD here, okay? When my partner got shot in 1989, I was senior to him. I'd been a cop for a long time. When he came out of the Marine Corps, he became a sports psychologist and had a good thriving business, but it was boring, and that's why he decided to become a DEA agent. And I'm sure that you guys may go through this as newbies come into the Marine Corps. You feel somewhat of a sense of responsibility to him or to them. And when he was the one that got shot and I didn't, I suffered a lot of guilt feelings about that. That was in 1989. I haven't had any dreams now for probably 2 or 3 years, and back then, even though DEA said you need to go get counseling, I was a freaking cop. I don't need counseling. I'm a tough guy. I don't need to go tell anybody. I don't need to go cry on somebody's shoulder. What a stupid attitude that was, right? Because now my guys, that after I became a boss and they got involved in shootings, I would escort them to the counselor. And it was primarily because I didn't go, and I should have. Here I was, multiple years into retirement, still having nightmares about my partner that got shot in 1989. Now we're still friends. Go on gameofcrimespodcast.com. You'll hear his interview. Kevin Stevens is his name. And it's funny because, we were right there in that bedroom together shooting at this guy, and the way we all remembered it was completely different. It's just amazing. So that's probably the only, there's lots of times when things don't go your way. Big cases don't go, or, somebody else gets credit for the job that you're doing. That happens a lot in federal law enforcement. There's a lot of people that'll take credit for your work. It's, I go to conferences. I used to go to conferences. I was still in a job, and law enforcement, it's multi-agency conferences, and we're all standing at the bar in the evenings and swapping war stories. And, you get a big circle of guys around. We might be smoking cigars, and it invariably somebody from another agency start talking about their participation, how they helped bring down Pablo Escobar. And I just didn't care. I don't care. I know the truth. And I would just stand there and listen, and all the DEA guys would look at me, and I'd just shake my head, and I'm like, let it go. It's not even worth bitching about, And our guys from New York, I don't know if any of y'all from New York, but y'all kind of outspoken. Yeah, you speak your mind, don't you? Yeah. So
when it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, and that's what these guys would do. They just couldn't take it anymore. You could tell they were like, oh, I got to say something. And then finally it's like, hey, jackass, do you know who this is over here? That's Steve Murphy. You ever heard of him? Or that's Javier Pena. You know who that is? Those are the guys that killed Pablo Escobar, although we didn't. That's what everybody said. That's the guys that killed Pablo Escobar. And every time the guys go, I got to go call my wife. I'll see you guys later. And they disappear like that. You never see them again. But, there's always people willing to take credit for something they didn't do, right? But I feel like the good Lord has blessed me with an entire career, and it's carrying over into retirement. I'm as busy now as I was as an agent. I'm not a 40-hour week kind of guy. And even now, I'm not a 40-hour kind of week guy, which my wife supports. And I think it keeps me out of her hair. That might be what makes a marriage last. I don't know.
Yeah. So I got another question for you. Watching the show, it's like the best visual experience that I've read. Mark Bowden's book about the hunt for Pablo. Yeah, that's what I thought after watching the Netflix series. But one of the, that's an iconic image of you standing on the rooftop next to Pablo's body. And so my thought is, or my question is that when U.S. military went in and got Osama bin Laden, this guy dies in his bedroom on the floor, 2 shots to the head. And when you look at Pablo Escobar, and this guy's dying and dies on a rooftop running for his life, and he's got no shoes on. He's all splayed out on his roof, surrounded by, hardworking Colombian and obviously a few Americans. And so you see that image, and I guess my question is what did you think about Pablo Escobar after trailing him for so long and how he died? And what were your thoughts about that ending?
We were in Kazakhstan speaking at a college, former Russia. That's the only time I've ever been over there. I've been to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. And it was one of those things where when we would speak on stage, you had to have a Russian translator. So you'd speak, then they translate. And if you told a joke, Javier and I start laughing at the joke, and then about 5 seconds would go by and the audience would start laughing. It was really strange. And so during one of the Q&A, one of the students or attendees that came, and this was a sellout audience. They had them sitting on the steps and everything, standing room only type audience. And one of them said, if Pablo Escobar was here today, what would you have to say to him? And this just popped right out of my mouth, because sometimes the brain doesn't engage before the mouth opens up. And I said, I wouldn't ask him a damn thing. I'd shoot him right between the eyes. And then I thought, oh shit, I don't know this audience very well. And I had to wait for that translation. and there was silence, and all of a sudden the entire auditorium erupted into cheers. And I thought, wow, you people are as sick as I am. But so, and it made me feel good, to be honest with you, that they felt that way also. The way I felt when Pablo was killed, my only regret was I didn't get to pull the trigger, but I'm glad I didn't, because the world needed to see that the Colombian National Police, how good they were, that they were taking their country back, because they had been beat down so bad. You know, the entire world looked down on them, especially for their president letting Pablo build his own custom prison and surrender under this unbelievable plea agreement where he only had to do 5 years in a custom built prison, which we all, you know, found out was a country club. And then he's absolved of every other crime he committed his entire life, including murders. You know, there's a statute of limitation on crimes in the United States that's typically 7 years, except on murder. There is no statute of limitations. We'll come after your butts, you know, 100 years after if we can prove it. And here they're letting a guy who we attribute 10, 15, maybe 20,000 murders to, whereas there's a documentary out called Facing Escobar. One of his remaining Sicario, who's now dead from cancer, he was on that same, excuse me, he was on that same documentary, and he says the number is more like 50,000 people that Pablo Escobar is responsible for killing. So I would have liked to have been the one to pull the trigger, but I'm fine with it. It was the Colombian National Police, and that's probably the best thing that could have happened. Now, when I got there, once I confirmed, because my primary mission is to confirm it's Pablo, not that they killed the wrong person again, you know, and you can read between the lines on that because it had happened before. Yeah. But once I saw it, there was no question in my mind that it was Pablo. I'll be honest with you, I felt like the world, the weight of the freaking world had been lifted off of my shoulders. There's Lieutenant Colonel Pelias was there with me, and he'd been to the FBI Academy. He's a strong U.S. ally. And I went to him, I said, Colonel, I probably shouldn't be here because the media is starting to show up. And by this time, the Colombian military showed up, and there's thousands of people milling around and the media showing up. And we didn't want a gringo to be seen on there. Now, for whatever reason that day, we weren't allowed to wear anything that looked like military police. So we typically wore jeans, blue jeans and polo shirts. And for whatever reason that day, I had on a bright red polo shirt, made me stick out like a sore thumb, you know. My sister was watching CNN that night and saw me scurrying across the roof. She's the only person I've ever talked to that recognized me on that show that night. But, you know, we wanted the Colombians to have all the glory associated with that, which they deserved. So they gave me a protection detail. We got back to the base. Eventually the whole search block comes back in. We tripled the guard that night because you just knew there were going to be retaliation attacks against you. And a police base in Colombia is like a military base in the United States. You got your outer perimeters, your mid perimeters, your inner perimeters, the serpentine driveways with the Jersey walls, and, you know, concrete pillboxes with machine guns and hand grenades available, and, you know, the whole ball of wax. And you kind of slept with your gun there in your bed with you anyway. It was the quietest night I ever spent in Medellin, Colombia, believe it or not. And it was just a testament of how much influence one man, one evil person had on that entire country. I mean, he had him in his fist, and he was doing whatever the hell he wanted to do. So next day, Javier had flown back in. They flew him in on a gunship into the Pace. It was a Friday. You know, I mean, he worked, I'd been there 3 years. He'd been there 6 years. So he's known these people much longer than I. There's lots of backslapping, high-fiving, and, you know, we may have had a few drinks there to celebrate. And so he and I hop on a plane, and we fly back to Bogota that night. Believe it or not, none of the agents came to pick us up at the airport. We had to catch a freaking taxi to the embassy, which, you know, it's just, you look out for your brothers and sisters, right? You don't do that. So, but when we got in the embassy, it was probably 6 p.m. And my wife and some other wives had planned this party. So we had cases of beer and pizzas, and we had the guys that were off duty from the Marine House were there with us. The guard, you know, the Marine security detail that was on duty couldn't drink, but the other guys came over because we were all really good friends, played football together and sports and all that. And when we ran out of beer and pizza, we hit the streets of Bogota. I got home about 10:30 a.m. the next morning. We partied all freaking night. And it just felt so good. I mean, you actually felt like maybe you really did have an impact. And so people will challenge you, well, did Pablo's death change, have any negative impact on cocaine trade? It did, but only for a couple of weeks, right? Because the Cali cartel stepped up, so we took them out, and then the North Valley cartel stepped up, and then a guy named Don Berna stepped up. And, Colombia is still the leading country for the production of cocaine today. But that feeling when it was over, it's like, yeah, I think it's time to go home. And I'm guessing all of you guys have been in a foreign arena where you've been there for extended periods of time. I don't mean just a short TUI, but what it did for me living as nice as Bogota is, and it's a beautiful country. I love it. I mean, there's a special place in my heart for Colombia. It really is. But as nice as it is, I never want to live outside the United States again. I was offered the regional director's position with DEA to be in charge of Colombia, Ecuador, and I don't know, some other country. I call it booger eaters, but some other country down there. And, as in that position, you get a security detail, you get drivers, the whole ball of wax. And I didn't even tell my wife about it because she'd go back in a heartbeat. It is, you live a lifestyle there that we don't live that lifestyle in the United States. But I told the administrator when she offered me the position that, living in Colombia made me appreciate living in the United States. There's all these little spoiled little turds that are running around here now complaining about their rights, and they've done nothing to earn or protect those rights. Take your happy ass for a year over some third world country and then come back and see how you feel.
Yeah.
If you haven't figured this out, I'm y'all's biggest advocate. So I'm real proud. I can't tell you. That's why I'm excited talking to you. I'm really proud to be here with you guys.
Absolutely. You guys got any other questions? Because I could keep on asking. Yeah.
Nobody wants to know about Javier's sex life in the show. Is that true? Hell, that's the one part of Narcos that is true. He was a man slut.
Well, that's good to hear. Makes me proud.
There you go. There you go.
So, what's some insider information, I guess, about Pablo Escobar that maybe most people don't know? Obviously, he was like one of the richest. He probably was likely one of the richest men in the world. We ran this cartel, and I can imagine all the trappings that comes along with. I mean, this guy's influencing governments. This guy's killing people. I mean, you talked about 50,000 murders, but I think the number is way higher if you take into account all the drug overdoses and
absolutely, yeah,
that his product ended up damaging. But yeah, any other things we haven't heard about Pablo Escobar that you know?
I'll tell you a couple. One is he was so rich to this day now, and if you equate his, Forbes magazine estimated his wealth at between $8 and $30 billion. Now his son says that's erroneous because it was much more than $30 billion. And he was killed in 1993. So if you equate 30 billion to today's money, I think it's more like 60 something billion. If you look at Chapo Guzman, who was one of the wealthiest drug lords or criminals in the world, his estimated wealth is something like 14 billion. Doesn't even come close to Pablo. So Pablo was the wealthiest criminal that's ever been. Now, some of these Russian oligarchs, like, that guy they call the president over there, Putin, he's nothing more than a freaking mobster. He's a criminal, and he's the president of that country. He may be worth more than that. I don't know. But your traditional criminals, like we're talking about, Pablo's still top dog to this day. But this is a fact that I like to point out to every audience because, between our website and the social media side, I hate social media. The only reason we do it is for marketing purposes because we have a little merchandise business. And, you can see these books behind me. Javier and I finally wrote a book a few years ago to tell our own story. And the reason I say that is because we get a lot of hate mail where, people would like to cut our heads off and shit down our throats. And I mean, we get some lovely messages sometimes.
Wow.
Things they'd like to do to your wife and your daughters, and things that Florida has a stand your ground law, and if you came to my house and said that, you might get dragged into my house and left in the floor and carried out in an ambulance. But I would never do that because I'm a peace loving person, except when you fuck with my family. So so where was I going with it? Oh, so I like to throw this one tidbit out to everybody, and it's actually public knowledge, but a lot of people don't want to admit it. when Pablo started dating his wife, Tata, Maria Eugenia now Vallejo, I think is her real name. Anyway, everybody calls her Tata. He was about 25 years old. You know how old she was? 12 when they first started dating. Now she's put a book out, and I read her book. It's called Pablo and Me, and the book sucks. I'll just be honest with you. It's all poor, pitiful me, poor, pitiful me. Yeah, I didn't know Pablo was the world's first narco terrorist. I didn't know he was the world's richest. I didn't know about the murder. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. But boy, I sure was having a good time on those trips around the world and all my shopping sprees and having multiple houses and chauffeurs and cooks and all that kind of crap. So I think the book is bullshit. But she admits in the book at having an abortion when she was 13 years old. So on top of him being the world's first narco terrorist and the biggest piece of shit that, you know, I mean, I put him right up there with Adolf Hitler. I despise this guy. On top of everything else, he's a pedophile. I mean, I've got, you know, my daughters are adults now. My 5 granddaughters are not. A 25-year-old man comes and wants to date a 12 or 13-year-old daughter in my family or a cousin or my neighbor's daughter. We're probably going to have some words.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's despicable. I don't have enough vocabulary to tell you how horrible I think. I'll take him out here. My wife calls this alligator in our backyard Big Al. I call him Boots because some days I'm going to be wearing that son of a gun. But I would take him out and introduce him to Boots. And I wouldn't let him run until Boots got a good bite. You know,
well, it's not surprising that he's as disgusting as we're learning more about his antics and who he was and what he was. But you know, it's interesting because in some ways, Narcos kind of lionizes him a little bit, and you know, certainly doesn't touch upon that. And I'm sure that it would certainly it would show a different light of who and what he was. And obviously he blew up that airliner in Colombia, and a lot of people don't know that. And then in many ways, the fingerprints of his existence continue throughout, you know, the world today. I mean, like you talked about, the Cali cartel rolled right into the vacuum that his death created in his empire, and continued. So, what would you do if you know, let's say you became the administrator of the DEA? How would you focus our current counter narcotics efforts? What would you do? Steve Murphy was the senior executive for the DEA.
Honestly, the first thing I would do is I would create. So DEA in headquarters already has what they call public and congressional affairs. I would create, and that's like 1 or 2 guys that are responsible for going to Capitol Hill to promote DEA. As much as I love the agency, and I will to the day I die, I still say we when I refer to DEA. We are the worst at selling ourselves to anybody. You know, the Marine Corps, you guys got a phenomenal marketing campaign out there, and you've got everything trademark protected. I mean, I've heard stories about people that might try to take the Anchor and Globe and do something with it, and then there's a Jag or somebody right up their butts almost immediately, because you have, you know, your bosses have a good marketing campaign that works for you guys. So DEA is horrible at that. I would send them over to the FBI to emulate what they do, because they have, I honestly don't know how many. I'm going to guess 40 to 50 agents assigned, and their job is just to, for lack of a better word, pander to some of our congressmen and congresswomen to support the FBI. That's why the FBI is the largest federal law enforcement agency in the United States. That's why where DEA is a single mission agency, meaning that we only have judicial authority over drug-related crimes. Title 21 is the title. But we can also investigate money laundering. And there's some peripheral things, gun charges, things like that. You can go also. The Bureau has over 400 different crime categories they're responsible for investigating. Everything from CT to bank robberies to kidnappings to, you know, interstate commerce violation. I mean, just everything, you know, telephone violations. They've even got one law in the books that says if we don't have a category that a crime falls under, we're still going to investigate it. You know, so I would increase DEA's visible presence on Capitol Hill so that more congressmen know what DEA does, how they do it, and why we do it. There's a lot of, right now we're going through a lot of anti-law enforcement sentiment in the United States where cities and counties and states are wanting to defund the police, and that's finally starting to backfire in their faces. San Francisco, about damn time you woke up a little bit. So DEA just needs to do a better job of that. The one thing I would continue to support in DEA is their foreign operations. DEA has the largest federal law enforcement footprint outside the United States of any U.S. law enforcement agency, including the FBI. So when I was in Bogota, we had 23 agents there. That was back in the early 90s. I think they probably have more like 50 there now. FBI had 2. They would call them legats, legal attaches. Yeah. So, and I think they have more than that now. I know down in Mexico, they have the rest 6 agents and that kind of stuff. But that's what makes DEA as one of the smallest federal law enforcement agencies successful is our foreign program, because very few narcotics are grown here in the United States. They're grown in other countries. So we're trying to take it to the world. And the nice thing is you develop all these working relationships so that our Five Eyes countries who are already our allies, they are now on the drug side as well, not just on the intel side. Mm-hmm. And same with other countries, believe it or not. I would do everything I could to enhance the budget to bring on more personnel. I think if we had a full complement of agents, it'd be 4,500. I think a more realistic number for what I'm hearing, this is just me, scuttlebutt, I think they're down to about 3,900 agents worldwide. And while that might sound like a lot, it's really not. In Greensboro, we had 5 agents, and 3 of those 5 agents were retired in place. We call them RIPs. They didn't hit a lick of a snake, And yeah. Me and another agent were the ones out making all the cases. So you had to depend on your state and local task force partners, which I prefer working with them anyway, because I didn't like feds when I was a local officer, and after I became a fed, there's a lot of feds I still don't like. But it gave you that background experience to understand why some of the state and locals don't like feds, and you could always work to counter that sentiment. You could call me out at 3 a.m. I'll be there with you at 3:30. My wife didn't like it too much because she was stuck raising 2 little girls most of the time on her own. But just like you guys, you guys deploy, you're gone for a year at a time, and it lays responsibility on your wife, and it's very similar. That's probably the main things I would do. I've never been asked that question. I've never even given any thought to that, but that's a hell of a question there. Carl, you got me with a new one.
Yeah, I always think about what I would do to change the Marine Corps, and although it's hard enough for me to change my own household, so it's just I'm just dreaming most of the time. But anyway,
I'm looking up an email here as you're talking, see if I can get that general's name.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, I don't want to take any more of your time, but I appreciate you making time for us. And it was great talking to you and sharing about much of what you learned, and then your involvement, obviously, with narcos. I'll pause to see if there's any other questions around here.
I got one. Hey, Steve, this is Stasar Moskovich here. I was wondering what sparked your interest in the DEA. Is there something that really came out from the DEA that really sparked your interest in it, or why you chose the DEA out of the other 3-letter agencies?
When I was a rookie police officer in 1975, I got hired in November. So in 1976, I went to the West Virginia State Police Academy for 3 months. And after the first 5 weeks, I think you'd get to come home on the weekends. And my best friend had gotten hired at the same time as me. Jackie Walters was his name. And so I would, I'd go hunt Jackie up on the weekends, and we go chase girls and drink beer and stuff. Hell, we were only 19 years old. I was a cop at 19 years old, way too young. And a friend of ours who worked in a gas station called us. This is a Saturday night, and he said, "Hey, there's this kid running around here, 17 years old, that's selling 1 pound quantities of weed." And 1975 in small town West Virginia, a pound of weed was a lot of dope. So we said, "Well, hell, call him. Bring him on down. Tell him we got some customers." So we hid in the back storage room of this gas station and 17-year-old kid shows up, and, you know, we're still rookies. I mean, we're still with training partners and all that. We didn't call them out on this. We didn't think it'd go, to be honest with you. And sure enough, the kid showed up with a pound of weed. He handed it to the gas station attendant. We stepped out. It wasn't like you see on TV where you jump out, freeze, and hit the ground and all that crap. You know, it's TV. We walked over to the gas station. I said, let me see that. And I looked at the kid and I said, how you doing there, pal? Oh, I'm good. I'm good. And we're in plain clothes. He didn't know who we were. And so I took a test kit out, tested it, and it tested positive for weed. And so I said, you're under arrest there, buddy. Well, you know, he's crapping his pants. He's crying. He's doing all this stuff. And here's the other side of that story. We got to the station. We called his parents because he was 17. And when his dad showed up, when I was 10 years old, I got stopped by the cops for trying to break in a house. And back then, the cops were allowed to use discretion on the street, you know, make a decision on the street, what you do with this criminal. It was me and two buddies. We were camping out. And so after that, we told them what we were doing. We owned up to it. We were too stupid to lie, you know, 10 years old. And they said, all right, well, boys, here's your choice. You're going to go with us and go to prison for the rest of your lives, or we can take you home to your parents. Now you decide. We all looked at each other and said, take us to jail. Because I knew it was going to happen when I got home. And it did. And so when this kid's father showed up at the police station, I don't know, it's a flashback or whatever, but I just knew his dad was going to be just like my dad, and business was going to be taken care of in the house. And I never filed charges against that 17-year-old kid. About a year and a half ago, like I say, we're on social media, but I look at it like every week or 2 weeks. And I usually look at it, just go and delete all the ugly messages we get. But I mean, we get a lot of support out of it too. And there's a message from a guy in West Virginia that says, this is the guy, I'm telling you, this is the guy that arrested me when I was 17 years old. And so I sent him we call it a messenger, instant message, or whatever you call it there on Facebook, a private message to him. And I said, hey, you know, this is Steve Murphy from, used to be the Bluefield cop. Are you that kid? And it was. And I never mentioned his name, but he could not be more appreciative. He's like, you know what? He said, I thought you were the worst person in the world that night. And it turns out you were the best thing that could have ever happened to me as a teenager. You know, you got me back on the right track. My dad almost killed me. And I think you knew that is why I never got charged. And now he had a professional life. He's been extremely successful. He's retired at a much younger age than I am, you know, and he's living life to the fullest. So it was, again, long answer to a short question. That was so exciting, you know, because you just saw it on TV. I'd read the Burke Serpico, and Joseph Wambo is a former LAPD officer that was writing books, and I read all his books. So when I got to be a railroad cop, one of the other cops was a former Virginia State Trooper that worked on a DEA task force. And he's the one that really talked to me about DEA. I didn't know anything about him. Looked into it, checked out their qualifications. I had to finish my college degree. So I was within just a few classes. And so I got that done and applied, and I didn't hear jack from him for like a year and a half. I'm like, geez, you know, I'm in Southern West Virginia, and my recruiting office is Washington, D.C., the field office up there. And so through his encouragement, and if you ever read our book, you'll read about Pete Ramey. That's the guy's name. Pete's like, get in the car and go up there and ask to speak to the recruiter. So here I go, 5.5, 6 hour drive up to Washington, D.C., country bumpkin coming in from the hills of West Virginia, go to the front window of the DEA office and said, hey, I'm Steve Murphy. And they're like, so? I'm like, I want to see the recruiter. Unbeknownst to me, the recruiter wasn't always in, but he was in that day. So he comes, his name's Charlie West. I'll never forget him. He ended up being a friend of mine later in life. He comes out, great old big black guy, and he comes out and he's like, who are you? And I told him, and so I'm a police officer down in Bluefield, West Virginia. And he's like, okay, well, what are you doing here? I said, what do you mean? I applied for DEA a year and a half ago. You're my recruiter. Why haven't I heard anything? And he's like, buddy, I've never heard your name in my life. I said, well, you know, could you check? Because I'd still like to be an agent. So he said, all right, give me a minute. And he comes back out and he's shaking his head. And he said, I can't believe, did you have an appointment with me? And I said, no, I'm just taking a chance. He said, how long did it take you to drive? And I said, 5.5, 6 hours. He said, are you driving home tonight? And I said, hell no, I got to get a hotel room. You know, he said, who's paying for it? And I said, well, I am. He's like, I can't believe you took a chance like this. He said, I found your application. It had been buried on the bottom of the pile. I will put it on the top of the pile starting today. So within 3-4 months, background's being done, all that stuff, I get a phone call. No, I'll get a letter from DA headquarters that says, your application has been rejected due to a former medical condition. Now, when I was a city cop, I used to party pretty hard and, smoke cigarettes and drink grain alcohol and stupid stuff like that. And I had bleeding ulcers. And, I got rid of them and hadn't had problems with them for years. And so I countered DEA. I challenged DEA. I said, is there any recourse? Because that condition hasn't existed for 10 years. And they said, well, you go get 2 physicals where you drink the barium and they do the x-ray of your stomach to show there's no ulcers, and we'll reconsider. And so I did that at my expense. And in the meantime, with the railroad, I got transferred from West Virginia back down to Norfolk, Virginia, and had only been in the office 2 or 3 days when DEA headquarters called and says, hey, we'd like to extend an invitation for you to become a DEA special agent. Are you still interested? I said, absolutely. And they said, when are you eligible to report? And I said, as soon as possible. They said, could you be here Monday? I said, you're damn right, I'll be there Monday. So I took 2 weeks vacation with the railroad. I actually got 2 paychecks for 2 weeks, and joined DEA. And then, now I'm a has-been. I get to talk to people like you guys, though. This is, I'm not blowing smoke when I say this to you guys, and anybody that watches the video as well. I'm so proud of what all you guys do. This is, and we do a lot of these. I did one the other night for the DEA Educational Foundation, who partner with Big Brothers Big Sisters. And that's extremely important to me to talk to them about counterfeit meds and opioids and so forth. But there's no other thing that I've done that I'm more proud of than sitting here talking with some of our active troops. People throw the freaking word hero out there. I mean, somebody wiped their ass by themselves and they get called a hero nowadays. You guys are the freaking heroes. You're the studs. You're the guys that deserve the recognition. And I am, from the bottom of my heart, sincere when I say that. Thank you for what you do, all of you. Please pass it on to the people you work with. Know that there's stupid people out here like me that I will support you till the day I die. So God bless you all. Thank you for everything you do.
Hey, thanks, Steve. And I'll leave it at that. I don't think I can top that, but appreciate taking your time this afternoon. And I'll get with you on email. We're going to edit this video, make sure we preserve the innocent.
Thank you. And the idiot.
But again, thanks for taking time out of your day. I appreciate it.
A real honor.
I'll stop the recording here now. Thank you.
All right.